Heard about the new Nitto 555 G2 Ultra High Performance tire? It's the next generation of the 555 you know, that steps up performance on every level. It's got better traction, handling, and wet braking. And if you haven't heard about it yet, you will.
Step up to the all-new Nitto 555 G2. Check it out at nittotire.com.
Blog Talk Radio.
We are the UR Tennis Network. Our mission is to be the voice of tennis. We enlist a team of passionate enthusiasts to promote our sport. We strive to bring interesting perspectives on the many spins of tennis. Our goal is to provide the learners of our sport with current news and information from many angles. We seek active participation from communities interested in tennis, but tennis is not interested in them. We are expanding our outreach. Tennis is a true lifetime sport that needs to be talked about, and the UR Tennis Network pledges to pursue this idea relentlessly.
Good morning and welcome to the Parenting Aces radio show on Blog Talk Radio's UR Tennis Network. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and we have another great show for you today. We're going to be talking tennis tech with the CEO of Donnay Xenecore Technology, and it's going to be very interesting to hear what this racket manufacturer is doing to help prevent injury, especially in our young junior players. And so I'm looking very forward to having that discussion today. Before I bring today's guests on the line, though, I just want to kind of give you guys a little bit of info on some stuff that's going on over at ParentingAces.com. For those who haven't checked out the website this in the last few days, I guess, I encourage you to pop over to ParentingAces.com. I am in the midst of a 21-day clean eating challenge with my husband and my daughter, and I'm chronicling that on the site mainly as a follow-up to last week's Parenting Aces podcast with Michael Farrington, where we were talking about nutrition for junior athletes. And this just seemed like a natural progression from that podcast to kind of share with y'all what my family is doing in terms of nutrition and clean eating and exercise and the effect it's having on me. And kind of an exciting aside to that is the Huffington Post has picked up the series as well. So Huffington Post is publishing my daily articles on our challenge, and they're on ParentingAces.com as well. So I hope you'll follow along. Also wanted to let you know that I posted a new article by Coach Todd Whittam yesterday. I've got another one that Coach Whittam sent me this morning that hopefully will go online later this afternoon if I get my act together. So please do check those out as well. Coach Todd Whittam writes incredibly informative articles for Parenting Aces. He's so gracious to share that information with us. And I think it's important, especially those of you with younger players, to take a look at what he writes and take his advice to heart. So anyway, without any further delay, let me bring on today's guest. We have with us Jerry Choe, who is the CEO of Donnay, and Richard Bowie, who is working with Jerry and with Donnay on the Xenecore technology. And I'm just so thrilled to have them with us. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining Parenting Aces and sharing your time with us today.
Glad to be here.
Yes, thank you for having us, Lisa.
So before we jump into the show, Jerry, I would love to just let you give our listeners a little bit of background on who you are and how you came to be at Donnay.
I am not a tennis player by trade. My background is in technology and legal technology and patents and trademarks. But I was able to develop a technology that was intended to curb the number of injuries in the sport, particularly arm injuries, which I thought was curbing the game and stagnating it in some degree, and to come up with a technology to dampen vibration and to create longevity for the sport and for our players and particularly our children. I have a 12-year-old who's an active tennis player, and I also feared that she would not be able to serve after 11 years old, and so I kind of made it my mission to try to come up with a technology and a product that would do some good in tennis and good for our children.
Fantastic. And Richard, why don't you give us a little bit of background on your role here?
I recently got involved with the Donnay CEO Xenecore by chance. Jerry and I got a little acquainted this summer at the U.S. Open while he was approaching some players, and I really kind of fell in love with the technology and the potential of the technology. The racket is we always mention the technology, but in essence, it's the only solid core racket that's really on the market, and it does offer some added dampening effect and preventive for injuries. So I pretty much have been assisting Jerry a little bit on the marketing approach and giving my professional experience with coaching, because I'm a coach by trade and with a bit of marketing background, and I've just been able to kind of give my insights and help Jerry in the redirection of the brand. And I suggested to him that this would be a good opportunity to speak out, reach the parents, and kind of inform them and educate them about other alternatives other than the big three out there, which are highly visible by the professional players. So we're here today.
That's fantastic. And I just, as a point of disclosure, like many of my guests on the Parenting Aces show, I connected with these guys via Facebook, and, there are a variety of tennis-related groups on Facebook and pages on Facebook in addition to, of course, Parenting Aces. And so Richard had reached out to me to introduce me to what's going on at Donnay and with the Xenecore technology. And so I'm just so happy that we were able to work out a date that would work for all of us, and I'm so appreciative again of you guys joining me today. So, Jerry, you said you have a daughter who plays, and that was, maybe part of the impetus behind the development of this new technology. If you wouldn't mind, maybe you can share more details on the Xenecore technology and what makes it so unique, and why we parents should be paying attention.
Well, it is the first. It's a molding technology. It's a way to make carbon lighter, stronger, and more dampening, and also to make shapes that you couldn't make before. It actually has a lot of application outside of tennis as well in any fiber process. There are some. We're working also on some wind blade technology, something in the automotive area. So it goes well beyond tennis, but it is a very innovative molding technology which uses microencapsulated gas to mold carbon from the inside. All other carbon products, including tennis rackets, are either hollow, which means they're empty inside, they're just air injected, or they're put together by two halved cores, which are the way wind blades are made right now. So there hasn't been a real innovation in carbon molding, or substantial innovation, to be able to make multi-core or shapes that you couldn't make in the past. So with the versatility, we could make a separate head in the tennis racket that encloses the head, and then make a separate shaft. So actually, you see one racket, but inside there are multiple cores that allows different characteristics, playing characteristics. If you want more power, if you want a bigger sweet spot, if you want more control, there's a lot more versatility than just the one empty tube, which is the way carbon rackets have been made from the beginning for the past 30 years. It's just one hollow tube that's bent into shape, and so and air injected, so there's not a lot of differentiation of the different rackets that have been out there. The primary differentiation is in marketing. The paint job, the brand name that's put on there, but the underlying technology is pretty much unitary, and that goes for not just tennis, but bicycles and golf shafts and all other products that utilize carbon and fiberglass.
That's really interesting. And so how does that translate into a healthier type of equipment, especially for growing bodies?
Well, the big difference between wooden rackets and the current carbon rackets is the dampening. And the reason is that and the reason why Xenecore acts similar to wood is that the underlying basis is a kind of foam. Wood is also a form of natural foam, and they both have high dampening effect. Versus something that is hollow and empty and light. More rackets are becoming lighter and lighter, and because of that, and because of the way the game has evolved into more power and more speed and more training, it's necessary to curb that with something that's going to be healthier for the arm and for the body.
If I may, maybe I could kind of be a little less techy in terms of the translation. Donnay Xenecore recently established an independent system of kind of giving rackets RSL rating. It's like a racket shock level rating, meaning the rackets that are a little hollow tend to actually produce, transmit a bit more vibration and force to the arm. The more solid core frames, obviously dampen that effect, and as a result, less force is transmitted through the arm and less vibration is transmitted through the arm. So we have a system where we pretty much, our independent system, where we grade rackets from 0 to 10. And for example, a Babolat Pure Drive, I don't know if it's say names, but in our independent studies, we kind of give that more of a 6 rating in terms of the amount of shock that the kids receive at impact, compared to maybe our Formula line, which is a similar type of racket, which has a better dampening effect and has about a 3 rating because less force and vibration is transmitted through the racket. What Jerry's saying in terms of the technology with going from graphite rackets and more into these modern technology rackets. I don't know exactly the structural makeup of Babolat or the new Heads or Wilson. They always have new names, but most of these rackets that the consumers and the kids are playing with are actually hollow to kind of give it that lighter effect. So the Xenecore technology has actually managed to make a similar weighted racket and specs, but the structural integrity is that it's solid, which has been proven that wood rackets are better in the arm. It's a heavier racket. If we talk about physics, a heavier racket will absorb more of the impact versus lighter rackets. But we can offer the same effect with a lighter racket because our rackets are more solid. I hope that kind of clears it up and not sounds so techy to the parents.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And it's interesting. Hang on one sec, Jerry. It's interesting to me because I remember when my son was younger and he was a huge Andy Roddick fan always and, wanted to play with Andy's racket. And all the kids were playing with Babolat at the time, and we started seeing a lot more arm injuries in these kids. And then coaches started recognizing that, hey, you need to be of a certain physical size and strength before you can manage the power that a Babolat racket's going to produce for you. And so then I think the other manufacturers kind of stepped up a little bit and took advantage of that. It's interesting to me that Donnay has found a way through the Xenecore technology, and Jerry, kudos to you for this, to kind of marry the best of both worlds, right? You've got the lightness of a Babolat frame, for example, with still maintaining the power and the safety, if you will, and I'm using air quotes here, the safety of a wood racket.
Yes. In fact, Roddick and Kleisters and a lot of those the pure drive players, actually did retire, with shoulder problems. So it's pretty well documented, although it's not well, known because it's not the kind of thing that manufacturers would want the public to know. But yes, there've been certain rackets have create shock and injury to certain parts of the arm. Certain, some of them shoulder, some of them wrist, some of them elbow. Yes, it actually creates. Your average shot. The studies creates or generates about 200 pounds of force on the arm. An average ground stroke. A hollow racket generates around 200 pounds of force. That's a tremendous amount of energy that's being transmitted from the racket. And, if you do that repetitively, hundreds of times a day, 1,000 times a day, that's when, you get to that point where you're going to stress the tendons. So the idea is to play well below that threshold. One way to do it is to just play less. The other way to do it is to, reduce the shock and vibration, which is what we've managed to do, to reduce it by, the studies show around 60%, to 60 to 70% of hollow beams. So on the average match, there's about 43,000 pounds of force that's being transmitted to the arm versus 13,000 pounds of force with multi-core solid core rackets.
Very interesting. I don't know if either of you guys have had a chance to listen to our podcast with Dr. J. He is a sports medicine specialist here in Atlanta, and he's got a tennis-specific medical practice. And one of the things he does is evaluate strokes and movement to help eliminate or resolve injuries in players. And so, at ParentingAces, we've talked a lot about the importance of proper stroke development, getting the basics down with good coaching early on for these young players. But what's interesting in talking to you today is hearing that it's not just the stroke development, it's also the technology, the equipment that the player's using. And when you talk about vibration, like Richard was explaining, that's the force that is impacting directly on the player's arm, that can over time, as you're both saying, cause these repetitive use injuries that can be simply avoided by changing the type of equipment that you're using. And strings are one way to do that, but the racket itself is another. So, Richard, maybe you can talk a little bit more about the specifics of choosing rackets for junior players and what parents should be aware of when they're out shopping for rackets.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, objectively speaking, I think that I don't know if there's enough information available to parents about maybe a best practice systems when purchasing rackets. I mean, very often, the kids see a racket from one of the top players and they're excited about it. and they really go out. One of the common questions sometimes you get with very inexperienced players is, what racket should I get? I mean, fortunate for me that I'll probably guide or advise them on a little bit more detail, more than just the brand. More so, you're looking at the length of the racket, depending on the kid's age. You're looking, obviously, on the weight. I'm a grams guy, so, I mean, very often I see kids that are using rackets that some people say aren't too heavy, but with the way modern-day strokes are now and how violent these kids are swinging, and the game becoming a little bit more angular momentum, not so linear, and people have the argument of saying, "Oh, the heavier rackets are good," but I think it's everything's a little relative to the physical development of the child. I mean, I don't want to say an 11-year-old should be using one racket, because we all know some 11-year-olds are 5'4" and some are 4 feet 9 inches. So that is something that parents need to take into account when purchasing rackets. I think the next factor is that is a common mistake is stringing. Some people get excited about getting into polyesters too early, and we all know polyester was probably the most recent cause of a lot of injuries with kids kind of using it, and the stiffness the added stiffness that the strings created. So I think the coaches and people involved in tennis kind of have a responsibility to educate the consumers. I'll see kids walk into a pro shop and say, "Hey, give me that Luxor Long Big Banger at basically 55 pounds," and he's a 10-year-old. And obviously people have become a little bit more aware, but how many people have to suffer at the hands of making poor choices to kind of know you got to string lighter, maybe you don't go to full poly when you're under 12, and so I think that it's relative, and parents should definitely consult with some of the coaches in terms of getting information about the equipment, and not just be swayed by the big marketing of the giants, and or they're just fascinated by what racket Federer or Nadal is using. And that may not be something that's good for them at that stage of their development.
Right, and I want to encourage my listeners, too, to go back through the podcast archives and listen to the show we did with Tim Strawn. Tim is a stringing specialist, and he spoke a lot about exactly what you're saying, Richard, and how important it is to take into account the type of string, the tension that it's being strung at, and the size and weight of the player herself to make sure that we avoid injury. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And Jerry, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was interrupting you, I think. The conventional wisdom has pointed to string and technique as the cause of a lot of the injury, but there have been studies done. Actually, Stuart Miller, who's the head of the technical commission of the ITF, he did years of study about string, about technique, and his conclusion was that the biggest cause is racket shock, because even if the string ultimately is going to affect the amount of shock that is going to be transmitted from the racket to the arm, because the string is not touching your hand, it's the racket that's touching the string, and the string and the racket that's touching your hand. So ultimately, the string and so forth might make the racket shock higher or lower, but it's really the racket shock that's causing it. So that's just one thing I wanted to add to what Richard was saying.
Well, and I know you guys have done some work as well, and Mark has also been a guest on the show, and he's an Atlanta guy too. So he and I cross paths pretty often. But maybe you can talk a little more about the work that y'all are doing with Mark and the stuff he's finding out.
Well, Mark is fantastic and really has been a great supporter. He as head of the technical sports science director of the USTA for many years, he has seen a lot of this epidemic as well. In fact, I think he said it was quoted that there was 150, over 100 million injuries since the 80s, since the advent of carbon rackets. So he recognizes well that there is a big problem and epidemic, and his mission, as is ours, is to try to address that. Health and injury prevention is a large part of his mission, as is ours. So we are very much aligned in that degree. And I can't say enough about Mark. He's really one of the best people out there in the market and in the industry.
No, if I may say, Mark Kovacs, I think, is probably one of our biggest supporters, and is very credible in the sports science community related to tennis. He's the founder of the ITPA, which is the International Tennis Performance Association. I know hopefully some of the guests have been familiar with him. Obviously, he's been the head of the sports science for player development, and a lot of what they do is do a lot of research into all the sports science that's related to tennis. And I think Mark has even identified that rackets have been a cause. And obviously he can be objective enough to say, I need to support what is best, because people don't know that Mark suffered, I believe he had a shoulder injury, and as a result, that's how he kind of found his way to the Donnay Xenecore, and he was able to kind of continue to play, and even at his exhibitions, he's serving, and he's a loyal supporter of the brand, and we're glad to have somebody like that recognizes what the product does for the consumers. That it's not just all about performance, but really keeping the kids and safe and keeping people in the sport a little longer. Because to be honest, I play with unfortunately, Jerry, I have to admit, I play with a racket that wasn't a Donnay today because mine were broken, and my arm is killing me. So I'm a little disappointed that I didn't have my Donnays today, and I'm suffering as we speak.
I'm sorry to hear you're hurting, and I totally feel your pain, Richard. So can you guys give us some more specifics about the different rackets available with this technology, and how would a player or a parent or a coach go about deciding which is the proper one for their player?
You want to address that, Richard, or you want me to?
Well, I guess let me give my opinion. We have a few college players that are using the Pro One line. I think the racket translates well to similar people who use maybe a Prestige or a Wilson Blade, or maybe a Radical. I would say that the Pro One line is maybe more to develop players, but it has been a very performance-friendly racket. At the same time, with that dampening effect, the Formula line seems to be a great translation to the Babolat rackets. So, parents could look into saying if my kid is very comfortable with the Babolat feel and they want a bigger head and maybe a little bit more power and a little more forgiving, they could look into that, into trying out the Formula. Jerry does have a great demo program that he runs primarily through his website, XenecoreTennis.com. And Jerry, you can,
yes, and we added a very special racket for those recreational players. It's 114 square inch, the world's lightest racket, 8 ounces, and it's got a tremendous amount of power and a tremendous amount of control. The problem with the oversized light rackets in the past have been you get a lot of power, but there's a lot of shock coming from the racket, and you don't have any control. The big difference with our 114 is that although it's super light, and you get a tremendous amount of power, you also get a tremendous amount of control. When you have a big empty void in the shaft, that's what causes the loss of control. That's why the bigger the shaft and wider the frame, the more loss of control you generally get. But without, because our racket is a solid core, even though it's a big, it's a wide beam, you don't lose control. So I got a couple of professionals even saying that, oh, you know what, I think I can play with this racket. I want to switch to it. And so I play with it now, and it's effortless because you're carrying around very, very little weight, or almost very nominal weight, and it's very easy to maneuver. I don't think I've missed a ball at the net since I've been playing with that racket. So you got a big huge space to hit in, and you get a lot of control. So that we think is going to be a winner for us, the 114. And as the game evolves into shorter swings, the prior generation, you would be using a smaller head from 93 to 95, 13-ounce pro staff, to now it's trended towards a 100 square inch, 10.5-ounce racket in a Babolat Pure Drive. Hopefully, maybe the next thing would be 114 square inches and an 8-ounce racket, where a lot of players can use that.
It's funny because when I started back playing tennis as an adult and had to go out and buy a racket, my instinct was to buy a lighter racket. And then I started hearing, if you buy a racket that's too light, then you're going to develop tendonitis in your elbow and your shoulder, and you're going to be out, and so you want a heavier racket. But it sounds like with this new technology, you guys have found a way to marry the comfort of a light racket with the injury prevention and, like you said, the control of the added weight without doing the damage. And I wonder if that's going to kind of trickle down to youth in the junior game. I think it would be great. There's nothing worse than hearing about a junior player being out with injury, and I went through it multiple times with my kid, and, it's just painful to watch. I mean, emotionally painful to watch, physically painful for the kid, of course. And so whatever we can do to help prevent that is fantastic. That said, even with the proper racket, again, the string technology has to come into consideration, as does proper stroke technique. So for the coaches listening, you guys are not off the hook.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on that point. I think, maybe, fortunately for me, I haven't had too many kids that have had serious injuries. As tennis players, we tend to have little minor injuries that we tend to recruit from. But after being involved with Xenecore, one of the things that I suggested, Jerry, was trying to establish something where we continue to educate people about that they need to look into their stroke development as well, that it's not just based on just performance, because I see kids that I'm like, I don't know, I just think that's a disaster ready to happen. I know that overuse is that if there's a strong likelihood with, poor mechanics, that there is a strong likelihood for injuries. I think people tend to become very receptive when they're dealing with injuries when it comes to the product. Unfortunately, that's when people want to hear, and they tend to try the product, like it. But Jerry can tell you about countless stories of players that have injuries they can't get past, and the only racket they've been able to continue to play with has been one of the Donnay Xenecore line rackets. I find that, that as coaches and programs, they don't pay enough attention to, especially competitive juniors, that they are paying attention to the mechanics, which does attribute to, like what Jerry says, racket shock, how much force or whatever a certain joint or especially in the serve is the part that I tell parents to be most critical of, because there's a lot of sometimes the overuse of the shoulder in the lower back, and that the rotator cuff is obviously the Achilles heel of most tennis players, because the use it takes during competition.
Yes, I'll just add to.
Go ahead, Jerry.
Yes, I'll just concur in that. We get testimonials every single day. My kid's the only one on his college team that doesn't need surgery. Thank you. Now I can throw a baseball after all these years. I can brush my teeth after I play tennis. So every single day we get these testimonials and how a lot of players are able to play through their injury without going to the medical venues or without surgery. And I think that's the idea. And then I'll also add something about the stability of the rackets you mentioned before. Yes, we're able to, in the past, because all rackets are pretty much made the same way, the only way to add stability was to add weight to the racket. The higher the weight, the more stable it is. So professionals, who are getting 120, 30 mile an hour serves, the only way to really have a stable racket is to have a heavy racket. Well, with our multi-core technology, one of the big attributes is that we can create stability even in a lightweight racket. So, that's one of the additional attributes of Xenecore.
Great. So let's give parents and the other listeners some practical information here about where they can try out these rackets. Do you guys have junior sponsorships that you offer? Do you have package deals that you offer to academies? What is the best way for a player or a coach to get involved with Donnay Xenecore?
Well, we have a good online program where and sponsorship packages. You can apply to get partial or full sponsorships on our website, XenecoreTennis.com. And that's also where you can order free trials, demos, and then if you wanted to get more involved with on a dealer level or an academy level, it's best to email our service at Xenecore.com, and we'll arrange get some demos out to and then start a relationship.
Fantastic. And I'll have a link to that website on ParentingAces.com on our links page this afternoon. So for those of you listening, if you can't find the website, just go on our links page and it'll be there. And let me just point out, it's Xenecore with an X. So for those of you trying to figure out how to spell it, it is with an X. Richard, did you want to expand on that from the coaching side?
Yeah, I mean, they have a player package for them. I think the rackets have been very well received with college, a lot of the college coaches that I don't want to necessarily put them on blast or use them. That have a couple of Division I schools are using the rackets. Some of the players have found that the performance of the rackets measure up to some of the big name rackets there, and obviously with the added safety measures behind it, I think that a lot of coaches, have found that it keeps their players on the court. And as college coaches, the last thing they need is another top player that's injured. Obviously we know we are competing with the big brands, and players are lifetime players of other brands. But once we get the rackets in the hands of certain players, they tend to really gravitate towards it. And I myself am using one of the Donnay rackets. I have a couple kids. I mean, and the juniors are always very receptive, after doing the injury. When pain sets in and the threshold isn't there and they have the opportunity to try something that's gonna ease the pain. We all take, I guess, cough medicine when we have a bad cough, and no matter how bad it tastes. I'm not going to say the racket plays bad. The racket plays well. So I think, it like you said, it coupled performance and comfort in one, which is and safety. So I think that's three major points that I think is really great about the Donnay Xenecore. I think we neglected to mention that the racket was a few years back very well received in the Pro Tour. James Blake was a Donnay user, Bethany Maddox-Sands. We've had some other players that have been experimenting with some of our prototype rackets. allegedly Roddick has been trade testing in one of our rackets in an effort to protect his shoulder. But like I said, allegedly. And then, I don't want to get too long.
That's fantastic. Donnay was popular when I was a kid. I mean, it's funny to see the brand reemerge, and in this crazy world of tennis where it's such a small world for such a global sport. It's nice to see the name back out there. So kudos to you guys for doing the hard work to get the brand recognition again.
Thank you.
Lisa, may I ask a question? What, as far as on a personal level, did your son deal with any arm-related injuries? I mean, I'm sure as players, with movements, we're going to twist ankles, tear muscles, groin strains, but anything related to the arm and shoulder, wrist?
No, for him it was always a low back thing, and so that was one of the things he dealt with. But I certainly, I hear from parents all the time whose kid has gotten injured, and again, as an adult player, I go out on the court, on the doubles court, and I'm the only one out there without an arm brace and a knee brace most of the time. So, I'm at the age, I'm not going to disclose the exact number, but I'm at the age where more often than not, I'm on the court with players who are a little disabled. But that said, I think as a parent, and again, that's why I was so happy to have you guys come on today. There's this challenge of keeping our kids healthy out there, but at the same time making sure they're getting the right number of hours on the court, the right number of hours in off-court training, that their equipment is the right choice for them, that their shoes fit properly. There are just so many moving parts to this whole junior tennis thing. And unfortunately, there are a lot of junior coaches out there that, for whatever reason, don't have the knowledge to keep our kids healthy all the time. And, I rag on coaches a lot, so Richard, forgive me for that. But I've just seen too many instances where coaches are either giving wrong information or they just don't have the knowledge. And so parents are left kind of flailing in this vast universe of choice. And oftentimes the final decision comes down to what a favorite player is wearing or using, as y'all, you acknowledged and understand. So that's why I feel like the more education we can provide to the parents, the better off our kids are going to be long term. And, this message comes across pretty much every week on this show that what we all really want for our kids is for them to be lifetime players, right? Where most of us are not delusional enough to think that our kid's going to be the next Andy Murray or Serena Williams. I mean, we get that that their competitive years are going to move more into a recreational level as they get older. So how do we keep them healthy? And these injuries that happen in the junior years can, if not addressed, can develop into these long-term permanent injuries that, like you said, you'll have people calling you and telling you, oh my gosh, I can throw a baseball again. I mean, how awesome is that, for an adult to be able to come back to something that they loved in their youth but were kept from because of injury.
Yeah. I concur in everything you said. You mentioned the lower back. I think that's the number one exercise a tennis child and everyone playing tennis should be doing is reverse hyperextension. But I seldom find a hyperextension machine in any tennis gym. So I wonder, why that isn't promoted more. And also stretching. My daughter goes out and everyone just starts playing. I was like, how come nobody stretches? And it's another way to prevent injury. So prevention is the key. Is how to prevent and create longevity, and it's those things I think that definitely need to be addressed more. I think when you or a child or anyone plays a long period of time, and I think I'm a big believer in vitamin C and alkaline water and all antioxidants. So everything from eating to prevention to exercise to stretching, it's all part of longevity. I agree.
Well, I think it's very interesting that, tennis has been really behind the curve in terms of technology and using technology to grow the sport. And only in the last really couple of years have we started to see this boom in tennis technology, not just in equipment, but also in stats and video analysis. I mean, all sorts of stuff. And I've had plenty of people on this show talking about, pieces that go into the butt of the racket or dampeners that collect stats. There have been all kinds of really cool developments in recent years, but you haven't heard the racket manufacturers talk about injury prevention in terms of what they're doing on the technology side. And so this is very refreshing to me to hear Donnay really kind of leading the charge with this specific conversation of how can we keep our players healthy using our racket? What is it that we need to change to help them stay on the court for more years? And healthy players are on the court. Players that are on the court are spending money. If they're spending money, that grows the sport and the industry. So it's a win all around.
So, I mean, if one analogy, comparison I came up with was I think we can't necessarily expect the manufacturers to kind of, blow the whistle on themselves, in terms of racket shock level and so forth, because many of the tennis consumers are very much performance-based. Everything, you look at the strings or you look at the rackets, it's all about the power of the spin. You might have a comfort rating on a string, but no one really looks at that number. They did away with that for a while because nobody cared what the comfort rating was unless it was an older player. We are always a little bit very much of the performance base. I was watching the movie Concussion a few months ago, and it's kind of like the same thing. I mean, the expectations, they're aware. I mean, but does the NFL want to acknowledge that concussion exists and that brain trauma was causing the players to have short lifespans? I mean, obviously it's not that severe with tennis because these are like class C like injuries. But I think we've kind of made that our mission because we made a product that is beneficial for performance at the same time is just a little safer. That it's not just a ploy, but it's an actual reality. One thing that the consumers and parents aren't aware is that the rackets the pros use are not the ones you're buying in the store.
Right.
I can tell you that firsthand. If you ever grab a pro stock racket, it's totally different. A lot of times there's paint jobs. There's paint jobs. They're using older model rackets. They don't change rackets in anywhere near the amount of times that you think they are. We all want the new thing, but it's I don't know. I might get hammered away by saying this, or just but I've seen it, and some of these rackets, some players have their rackets injected with foam, aftermarket, and that's something people aren't aware that they actually produce something similar by injecting foam into the rackets after production, which gives it a little bit more of that dampening effect. But it's very difficult to do that and maintain a lower weight without necessarily Xenecore's patented technology, which is where we come into play.
Interesting. And, yeah, I mean, we've talked about that a bunch on this show, too, the fact that the racket you're buying in your local pro shop is not the identical racket that your favorite pro is playing with out there. And, that when Tim Strawn was on the show, he talked a lot about lead tape and shaving grips and all kinds of modifications that can be made to rackets to personalize them to the player. But let's face it, not every junior is going to have access to someone who has the knowledge and the technical ability to make those modifications. So the general tennis playing public, and I include junior players in that group, we're at the mercy of what is on the shelf. And so we have to be educated about what effect weight has, what effect string has, string tension, grip size. All of these things impact proper biomechanics, and these are the things that Mark Kovacs is looking at. These are the things that Dr. J is looking at, and that hopefully more manufacturers will join the bandwagon that Donnay has created here and do their part to help keep players healthy. And I just think you guys you're doing a real service to the industry, and as a parent, I thank you. I think it's fantastic, and my hope is that every kid that ever picks up a racket continues picking up that racket until they're 80, 90 years old. I think that's the goal for all of us, and it's only going to improve the industry overall if that happens.
Yes, we hope that the USTA and the ITF could partner in the same mission. Maybe eventually over time that could happen. Mark is actually holding a very big convention in July at Life University that holds it every year. So I would definitely encourage anyone who wants to get more educated about the biomechanics and health and safety related issues to attend that conference. We'll be down there as well. Perhaps if you're going to cover it, perhaps we can see you as well over there. But yes, I think
we definitely need to meet up for a cup of coffee, if nothing else.
Okay.
You will be in my neck of the woods for sure. Yeah, I mean, again, I put the onus on the parents. We are responsible for our kids' health and well-being out there. Ultimately, it falls on us to make sure that they're making the right choices, and that we get educated. And so the fact that, Jerry, that you and Richard are willing to come and talk about these technological developments that are going on in the racket industry, it's very helpful. And, I hope that as more developments happen on your end, that you'll reach out to me and come back on and share them, or send me press releases that I can post on ParentingAces.com. And, that way we can keep our readers at least abreast of what's going on in the industry.
We're happy to do so, and we're going to start releasing some things that would promote the idea of a health mission. Perhaps some free dampeners, free vitamin C, free frame dampeners, and other things that at certain events, and maybe even on our website, we're going to have these free products just to build awareness on the health mission, because we found that the numbers were quite staggering. Over 70% of children in intensive training programs, suffered some kind of injury before they were 16. Many of them needing surgery. The hospitals of Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, they were doing hundreds of surgeries on tennis kids every year, and it is the kids are much more vulnerable because their bodies are just growing. There was a 2009 Newsweek article where the Newsweek interviewed Martina Navratilova. The article is called "Sidelined in Their Prime." It basically talked about being sidelined when you're just starting. So it is a grave concern, and we just hope that the governing bodies, take this more into consideration. The USTA, the ITF, and we're always happy to partner with maybe even certain regions of that, so we can get that the message out and the mission we get somewhere with the mission.
That's great. Yeah, I would love to stay in touch with you guys, and maybe we can come up with a list of tournaments, where you guys could have a presence. One of the things that tends to happen with our governing bodies is they focus on the big national events with the top level players, and really where people need the outreach is at the entry level events. When they're just starting in the sport, that's where they need the education. And so I would hope that you guys would reach out to more entry-level tournaments and tournament directors and, try to catch these families early on before they've already spent $500 on rackets for their kids without having the benefit of understanding how those choices are going to impact their child down the line.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
Well, yeah. So, guys, thank you so much. Is there anything else? We're down to our last couple minutes. I didn't know if there was anything else y'all wanted to throw out there, website, contact information, resources for our listeners.
Yeah, I would just encourage the parents to kind of, if they're looking to, expand their knowledge of sports science related to, tennis players, very tennis specific, check out the ITPA. I think it's ITPA.org. Mark Kovacs is a very credible guy. The rackets, Xenecore Tennis. We're on Facebook. We're still active on Twitter. You can follow us there. And anything else, Jerry?
Yeah, feel free to email me at Jerry at JERRY@Xenecore.com with an X. Or you can call in. We have a toll-free number, 1-877 Donnay 7 is our toll-free number. And so any other questions or concerns, we'll be happy to answer them.
Yeah, and if anyone's in, for example, the New York, New Jersey area and wants to swing by and to check out the rackets, or they have a junior player that maybe dealing with some injury-related issues or injury issues, and they want to have the players looked at from a technical perspective or even equipment, they can visit me on my website as well. It's performtennis.com. If you're in the area or maybe during the Open, I'm usually in the area, if not on the court. But yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys both so much for being with us today and sharing this information with the Parenting Aces audience. I learned a lot. I always learn a lot from my guests, so thank you for adding to my own personal body of knowledge too. And I look forward to seeing that Donnay logo out there a lot more, especially at these junior tournaments. Parents, check it out. Go to Donnay's website, go to XenecoreTennis.com and get information there. And as I mentioned before, links to all of these sites will be on ParentingAces.com on our links page. So take a look. Guys, thank you again. I hope you are having better tennis weather than we're having in Atlanta today. I don't know. My mixed doubles team is headed into the playoffs this weekend, and I haven't been able to get out on the court because it's been raining so much. So I'm a little worried about how that's going to go on Saturday.
Well, good luck on that. We're getting warmer weather here, so hopefully it'll continue. And thanks for having us.
Thanks again. To my listeners, thanks so much for tuning in this week. I hope you have a great week out on the court. Stay healthy out there, and we'll see you next week on Parenting Aces.
Okay, bye.
Geico presents sharing versus oversharing. Today, Bridget Griffin shared a video of her daily yoga routine, 2 self-help articles, and her new blog called Build Your Inner Bridge with Bridge. Girl, your sharing has turned into oversharing. No worries, Bridge. Geico has some info worth sharing with your 7 blog followers, like how you could save money on your car insurance, update your policy, and report a claim just by visiting geico.com. How's that for building your inner bridge? Bridge, Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.